In an era where racism is increasingly filmed but rarely punished, a haunting story has emerged, one that forces us to confront the quiet brutality women of color still endure in the shadows of authority. She had a beautiful face. She was visibly pregnant, but to a certain officer, that didn't make her worthy of dignity. It made her disposable. Pretty doesn't mean protected. Maya, name changed, a young woman in her third trimester, was pulled over during a routine traffic stop. According to witnesses, she was respectful and compliant. But the officer's demeanor shifted the moment he approached her window. His tone turned aggressive, his posture intimidating. And when Maya tried to explain that she was pregnant and not feeling well, she was cut off, yelled at, and forcibly removed from her car. It was all caught on video, a viral clip now etched into public memory. But what the camera didn't capture was the terror that lingered long after. The shaking hands, the tears at night, the silent question growing inside her. Will my child be safe in a world like this? Trauma with no visible marks. There were no broken bones, no visible bruises. But the damage was real. Maya now suffers from recurring panic attacks, insomnia, and constant fear. Loud voices trigger her. Sirens make her flinch. And the once joyful anticipation of motherhood has been replaced with anxiety and distrust. The pain she carries is invisible, like the racism that triggered it. It's not just about one officer's behavior. It's about a system that taught him to see a pregnant black woman not as someone deserving of care, but as a problem to control. The real violence we don't talk about. We often associate violence with what we can see: fists, guns, blood. But the most lasting wounds are often internal. They come from being dehumanized while carrying life. They come from knowing that your safety, even as a mother-to-be, is negotiable in the eyes of the state. Maya's beauty didn't shield her. Her pregnancy didn't protect her. And her silence won't save others. That's why her story must be told. Not to sensationalize her pain, but to hold up a mirror to a system that still chooses power over humanity. We owe it to her and to every woman who's ever been treated like less than a person while carrying more than just herself, to do better. After the silence, what justice could look like. Maya hasn't spoken publicly since the video of her ordeal went viral. But those close to her say she's watching the world react. She's reading the comments, seeing the protests, hearing her name echo in chants, sometimes softly, sometimes like thunder. The officer involved has been placed on administrative leave, but no charges have been filed. And as with many cases like this, the public grows skeptical. Justice delayed has too often meant justice denied. Still, something feels different this time. Community organizers, legal advocates, and even mothers from across the country have rallied in her name. Crowdfunding campaigns have raised over $150,000 for Maya's recovery. A team of civil rights attorneys has offered to represent her pro bono. And in a surprising but powerful move, several nurses and midwives have come forward offering prenatal support and mental health care. She's not alone, says activist Shonda Lee. And we won't let this system pretend it didn't happen. When a story becomes a spark, what happened to Maya is becoming more than just a story. It's becoming a symbol. One that highlights how even the most vulnerable among us, pregnant women, aren't spared from institutional cruelty. And yet, from that pain, people are building something: coalitions, policies, and conversations that didn't exist a week ago. Proposed reforms now include mandatory trauma-informed training for all officers, legal protections specific to pregnant women in law enforcement encounters, a national registry of police misconduct accessible to the public. Change is never instant, but stories like Maya's, when they're told honestly and loudly, become part of something bigger, a collective memory that pushes policy, culture, and conscience forward. The hope within her. Perhaps the most powerful part of Maya's story is not the horror she endured, but what she's carrying through it. Her child, her future, her proof that even in a world that fails to protect, life insists on growing. Maya has chosen not to let her trauma define her child's beginning. This baby, her sister shared in a recent post, will be born into a world that knows their mother fought. And people listened. The bruises may be invisible, but the impact of her courage won't be. The weight of silence. In the days that followed, Maya stopped answering her phone. The noise was too much. Journalists calling, strangers offering sympathy, trolls leaving threats. Her social media accounts were flooded with comments. Some called her brave. Others, disgustingly, questioned why she didn't just comply. As if being compliant had ever saved anyone when skin color alone was seen as defiance. She began waking in the middle of the night, soaked in sweat, gripping her stomach, terrified she had lost the baby. Her doctor warned her that the stress was dangerous. Her therapist said her body was storing the trauma like muscle memory. Every heartbeat, every breath, carrying echoes of that moment when she thought she might not make it home. "I was scared he would kill both of us," she finally whispered during one session. And he didn't even blink. When justice stalls, the city held a press conference. The police chief read a carefully worded statement. "We take this matter seriously and are conducting an internal investigation." But the officer in question, still at home, still being paid, still protected, no arrest, no charges, no apology. When Maya's lawyer pushed for body cam footage, the department claimed it was under review. When the public demanded the officer's history, they were told it was a personnel matter. Transparency, as usual, became a game of delay. People marched. Signs with Maya's name dotted the streets. But the system that had bruised her now stood behind a wall of bureaucracy, too slow to care and too proud to admit guilt. And through it all, Maya remained hidden. Not out of weakness, but survival. Her baby was due in 3 weeks. She couldn't risk another collapse. Couldn't watch another headline twist her pain into spectacle. The unseen breakdown. One evening, her sister found her curled on the floor of the nursery she had just begun decorating. The crib was still half assembled, its manual open like a plea for instructions on how to keep breathing. A tiny onesie hung on the wall. "Hello, I'm new here," printed in gold letters. Maya didn't speak. She just stared at the floor. "I feel like I've already failed her," she finally said, barely audible. "Before she's even born." And in that moment, the truth cracked open. This wasn't just about one violent encounter. It was about a life interrupted, a motherhood tainted before it began, a system that taught Maya, like so many others, that her safety was optional. The final tier. Labor came early, 2 weeks before her due date. It was fast and painful, a blur of hospital lights and muffled prayers. But her baby girl arrived breathing, crying alive. Maya named her Hope. And in the quiet of that hospital room, skin to skin, Maya cried. Not because the pain was over, but because it wasn't. Because she knew this world might one day hurt Hope the same way it hurt her. But for now, there was breath. There was warmth. There was a heartbeat against her chest. And that, she decided, would be her reason to keep fighting. Postpartum in the shadow of fear. The hospital room was dim, silent except for the soft cooing of the newborn in Maya's arms. Nurses came and went, offering kind smiles and warm reassurances, but Maya felt detached, like she was floating above her own body, watching herself go through the motions of motherhood. Every cry from her daughter sent jolts through her spine, not because she was annoyed, but because her own nervous system had been rewired by fear. She had learned to flinch first, question safety later. Maya had survived the incident. She had survived the birth. But she had not yet survived the aftermath. There were days she couldn't leave the bed. Nights she stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering how she would teach her daughter to exist in a world that had nearly erased her before she took her first breath. Her therapist diagnosed her with PTSD, postpartum depression, and a high risk for maternal burnout. But no diagnosis could fully describe the guilt she felt. The guilt of bringing a child into a world she wasn't sure she trusted. "I look at her," Maya confessed one evening to her sister, "and I feel joy and fear at the same time. It's like I'm holding a miracle in one hand and a warning in the other." A system still silent. The officer still hadn't been charged. A small local protest outside the city courthouse was broken up by police within 20 minutes. Maya watched the live stream on her phone, her hands trembling. One of the protesters was pushed down, face first. She recognized the officer immediately, the same one from that night. Still in uniform. Still untouchable. It struck her like ice. If they could do this to her after the world saw what happened, what were they doing to the people who never made it to a camera? And what about the ones who didn't survive at all? Names flooded her memory. Women like her. Forgotten or ignored. A quiet genocide of trust. She wrote in her journal that night. They don't need to kill us, to erase us. Sometimes, all they need is silence. The unfinished fight. One morning, 2 months after Hope's birth, Maya sat by the window with her baby asleep on her chest. A soft rain tapped against the glass. The city was still the same outside. Cars, sirens, hurried lives, but something inside Maya had shifted. She didn't feel better. Healing wasn't linear, but she felt ready. Not to forgive, not to move on, but to speak. She reached for her laptop, opened a new document, and began writing her story. Not for the headlines, not for pity, but for truth. I want her to know, she typed slowly, that her mother didn't disappear. That I screamed even when no one listened. That I stayed. That I loved her in the middle of a world that didn't love me back. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, her fingers kept typing. And somewhere between the grief and the pages, something began to rise. Not closure, not peace, but power.